Today, the White House intervened for the first time to stop a key witness from cooperating with Democrats' impeachment inquiry, blocking top diplomat Gordon Sondland from showing up for his deposition only hours before it was scheduled to take place.
By preventing us from hearing from this witness and obtaining these documents, the President and Secretary of State are taking actions that prevent us from getting the facts needed to protect the nation's security.
President Trump said he stopped it because the inquiry is illegitimate, calling it a totally compromised kangaroo court. His allies signaling this could be a broader strategy to stonewall, with one saying the days of playing nice are done.
When you have a Speaker of the House who says we need to strike while the iron's hot, when you have a chairman of the committee who is so biased against this president.
The fight coming as CNN is learning more about the call that started it all. Sources say as soon as Trump hung up with Ukraine's president in late July, a mad scramble began inside the administration. At least one National Security Council official alerted the White House's national security lawyers that there were concerns about what Trump said. Those are the same lawyers who later ordered the transcript moved to a more secure server in order to limit those who could see it. Several aides frantically asked if they should notify other senior officials who weren't on the call, like those at the Justice Department, since Trump had invoked the Attorney General's name several times. The focus now turning to those who listened in during the call, including the Secretary of State, top national security officials, and aides for the Vice President and Chief of Staff. Democrats say despite White House efforts to stonewall, they'll continue their investigation of whether Trump abused the power of his office.
Through this impeachment inquiry, we are determined to find the answers. Thank you.
Many smokers turn to vaping to help them kick cigarettes. But now, after hundreds of lung illnesses and more than a dozen deaths linked to vaping, health officials are concerned that it could lead to even higher numbers of people addicted to nicotine.
It's a remarkable story to follow, particularly how quickly the view of this has changed. CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta, he's been on top of this from the beginning. And of course, he has a new series coming out, the first part of a special series on America's vaping epidemic. I mean, Doctor, is it clear now that this is a real danger here?
Well, you know, there is a balance when it comes to this concern that you're raising. This idea that vaping can help adult smokers quit smoking. There's some evidence around that, but at what cost? At what cost specifically to our youth? There's a history of vaping. We wanted to show you the history of vaping and also tell you where we are now.
Last week, lawmakers had some tough questions for the FDA.
There was clearly a massive regulatory failure that allowed for this to happen, was there not?
Speaking about the epidemic of youth use of e-cigarettes, in retrospect, the FDA should have acted sooner. We should have begun regulating these devices sooner.
Could we have predicted this problem?
I think we could have, and I think we could have helped to prevent it.
Dr. Michael Siegel has been researching tobacco for 34 years. Most of his attention lately, vaping.
How many people do you think are vaping in the United States right now?
So the estimate is that right now there are approximately 10 million.
And how many of those people do you think are former smokers?
So of the adults, I think the overwhelming majority are ex-smokers or smokers who are dual using.
After 20 years, I was smoking at least a pack and a half a day. I couldn't walk upstairs without losing my breath. I was coughing up phlegm in the morning and throughout the day.
While many vapers are dual users, meaning they also smoke, 41-year-old James Hillgreen is one of the 3 million vapers who have completely replaced their cigarette habit with vaping.
And it'll be 4 years actually at the end of this year, where I made a resolution to quit smoking altogether.
One study found that nearly 20% of people who vaped to stop smoking were still off cigarettes a year later. That's twice as effective as other nicotine replacement strategies.
Throughout that whole process, I felt better and better. Being able to exercise more, I feel better.
The story of vaping is also the story of smokers who, starting in the mid-2000s, turned to e-cigarettes to help kick their habit. But more recently, that story has taken an ugly turn. Because as former smokers like James have turned to vapes, so have kids. The numbers will boggle your mind. In 2017, 11.7% of high school students vaped. In 2018, it jumped to 20.8%. And now, 27.5% of high school students admit to using e-cigarettes. The CDC estimates over 3 million high school students are currently vaping.
How did we get here?
We know that often the first product a teen uses is a flavored one, and there have been flavors that are really targeted at young people, candy, fruits, and so forth.
It's why states like New York, Michigan, Rhode Island are now banning the sale of flavored products. The Trump administration has proposed a similar ban just a few weeks ago.
But when people don't like flavors, adults don't like flavors, I think that that's pretty crazy to say.
A lot of adult ex-smokers who have quit smoking using these flavored products are almost certainly going to go back to smoking.
Why?
Because it's such a strong addiction.
They still have the tobacco-flavored e-cigarettes. Why would they go back to smoking?
I think the reason is because the whole point of switching to vaping was to get away from the tobacco flavor.
It wasn't to reduce the harm of tobacco?
Well, it was, but I think that what really is sustaining it and appealing to them is the flavors.
On one hand, there may be evidence that it helps adults who are smoking stop smoking. On the other hand, it is very attractive to young people and may create more vapors and subsequently more smokers. Ultimately, if that's the balance, how does an organization like the CDC decide what they're going to recommend?
Well, we don't think that the cessation of smoking in adults should be at the expense of teenagers. We really, right now, are focused on protecting youth from a life of nicotine addiction.
And there is a deeper concern. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, nearly 31% of teen e-cigarette users go on to smoke regular cigarettes within 6 months. I decided to ask my own kids and their friends about it.
Like, what makes a teenager continue to vape despite all that they've heard?
I think it's like being able to like rebel.
I feel like maybe it starts off as them like getting it in order to like fit in or be like, oh, I have a Juul. But then
For them,
it turns into something else.
It's mostly Juul.
We were completely surprised by the youth usage of the product, and we are taking measures now and will take increasing measures to prevent that use on a going forward basis.
In 2018, the vaping story took a turn again. Altria, the parent company to Philip Morris USA, bought a 35% stake in Juul, and the new CEO of Juul. He comes from the world of tobacco.
You know, they're going to make money if people smoke, they're going to make money if people quit. And so I think that's part of the problem.
It's a conflict, a huge one, and one that many in the vaping community are taking notice of, steadily distancing themselves from Juul and blaming them, and them alone, for the dramatic rise in youth nicotine addiction.
I think that there is a fundamental difference between Juul and all other e-cigarettes. It's a completely different nicotine form. And that nicotine form is rapidly absorbed into the bloodstream. I think juuling, to me, represents a far greater hazard than just using a regular e-cigarette.
Now, it's worth pointing out we did reach out to Juul. They said they would not participate in an interview at this time, but they have agreed to the ban on flavorings, and they've agreed to suspend all of their digital broadcast online advertising as well. So they are doing that. But again, this is a different story. We're talking a lot about these illnesses and injuries to the lungs lately. Mm-hmm. This is a larger issue in some ways, Jim and Allison, about this concern about youth nicotine addiction.
No question.